On today's episode of Gathering the Kings.
I'm still an engineer, and it came time for a review with my engineering boss, and I sat down in front of him. He's like, "Yeah, you're doing great, and we want to keep continuing giving you the work that we're giving you, and we want to give you a raise." And I was like, "I got to stop you because I've made a decision to leave the company." And I'm sure at first he was probably like, "What engineering company are you going to?" And I was like, "No, I'm going to build houses. This is what I'm going to do."
Yeah.
And he just very supportive person, very supportive of the military. And he was like,
Sure.
"Great, best of luck." And he sends me Christmas cards still every year to this day. And that was whatever it was, 15 years ago or something like that.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And then from there, I just took it to the next level, and I just started building more and more homes.
You are listening to Gathering the Kings with Chaz Wolfe, featuring fellow 7, 8, and even 9-figure business owners who have real battle scars from business and life, but have prevailed as the king that they are designed to be. We welcome high-performing entrepreneurs to the stage in order to reveal the real of the real on what it takes to build a successful business today. We dissect the good and bad decisions they've made along the way that give a true and accurate picture of the journey of success and how you too can get there. Through this dialogue, you will learn the value of growing your network and surrounding yourself with power players and kings like today's guest. Grab your pen and notebook because we're about to dive in. What's up, everybody? I'm Chaz Wolfe, Gathering the Kings podcast. I'm your host. Today, I've got Mike Christensen on the King stage. Mike, how you doing?
Doing well this morning. How about yourself?
I am also well. It's Tuesday. What? I mean, how could I not be?
Right after Thanksgiving.
Right, exactly. If anybody's been listening to the show for any length of time, they may have heard me say it's Monday. How can I not be? They may have heard me say it's Thursday. How can I not be? I think the attitude of let's go get it today, whatever day it is what guys like you and I feel. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. It's the motivation and the purpose that drives us to get up every day, right?
That's right. Exactly. Mike, tell us what kind of business that you got, brother.
So I've got a custom home building company that we're in our 20th year now.
Wow.
Out in Arizona.
That's incredible. And so a lot of years, a lot of probably up and down that we can get here to today. Before we do that, though, I want to know, after 20 years, I mean, I'm sure you've built some incredible homes. I'm sure you've set your family up with the success that you've already had. My question is why? Why are you still at it? Why are you here today? What's the bigger picture? What's that motivation and drive you just talked about for you?
Yeah, so going into 20 years now, after leaving a W-2 job, kind of a story that a lot of us share. Yeah. I've got kind of 3 different whys that get me up every morning, and one of them is to be able to. My parents recently have moved from Arizona back to Chicago. I'm originally from the Chicago area.
Okay.
And one of my whys is, as they get older, is to be able to have the income and revenue for my business that, as their health maybe eventually starts going downhill 20 years from now or whatever that looks like, right, to be able to jump on a plane and be able to get out there and be with them and help them as much as I can. So that's one of my whys.
Yeah.
The other one is to create the time freedom for my wife and I, and really be able to create that freedom so that my wife doesn't have to work. She can truly pursue the things that she wants to do from her creative side.
Yeah.
And my last why is helping veterans. I've got a big why based on my military background and what I'm trying to do to help vets long term, because I've been through some friends taking their lives and things like that. So I'm trying to create some different things for that as well.
Yeah. I mean, first off, that's incredible. We as in me, my family, anybody who's listening, we appreciate any service that you've given to the country, as well as any of the folks that you're referring to that are in your immediate circle. Those things are very, very heavy and impactful. And so we thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, okay. So you had 3 clear, distinct, here's what I'm doing and why. Has it always been that clear for you? Did that come about at a certain moment in time? Like, tell us about how you got so clear on these whys.
No, I would say it's come up the last couple of years, maybe year and a half. I've always been a very motivated person to get up every day.
Sure.
And I don't know if that's from my military background or whatever, but getting these things written down and to be able to spout them off like that, like that's not a question you asked me to prepare for, right? It was, right. It's so I know what what I need to do and what I'm getting up for every day. But to answer your question, I think a lot of things that have changed for me in the last couple of years is because of the mastermind group that we're in, GoBundance. And it's just opened the doors to so many things, about so many different things. And honestly, it's come up so many different times. I was like, I just got to think about this. I got to get it written down. And that's what I did.
That's incredible. Obviously, the impact of your clarity on all these other people, right, is stemmed in your answer, what you just said, from other people impacting you.
Yeah.
How the full circle comes about, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah. I never really thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And obviously there's lots of opportunities to connect with other entrepreneurs. We're going to get to that here a little bit later in the show, but Gathering the Kings started as a mastermind group before the podcast. And so that's for 7 and 8 figure owners. And we dial in to these things. And you're right. When you have other people who are dialed into what they're doing and you're running alongside that person and you don't have it dialed in, it is evident.
Yeah.
And like pressure, obviously good pressure, but it forces you to think and do at a whole nother level. So I appreciate that perspective for sure. Let's go a little bit practical. Tell us how you got started in the business. I assume it was some sort of a connection getting out of the military, but give us a little bit of your backdrop.
Yeah. So looking back all these years, and I've done a couple other podcasts, and it's really made me think back to what made me decide to be an entrepreneur and my journey along the way, which led me to where I am today. And you look back and you start thinking about, like, where did it actually start? When it was, for me, growing up as a Midwest kid, it was, my dad was like, go get a paper route. You want money? Go start slinging papers on, in people's driveways, and then go collect that money. So as a young kid, that was a little bit of a daunting task. It was being uncomfortable and going, okay, I'm going to go knock on somebody's door and go, hey, you owe me $5 for last week's papers, and trying to go back over and over to collect that money. And then eventually my dad helped me with that. We grew that little paper route business to where we were, instead of me doing it on my bike with the paper sitting on the front, it was now we're doing it out of the car, and we're doing 3 times as much. And my dad and I are doing this at like 3:30 in the morning because he's got to leave for work at 4:30 or 5 or whatever it was. And so it became this little bonding thing that brought us together. So that was kind of the start. And then I turned it into, well, I'm going to go cut grass for people, and then I'm going to rake their leaves, and I'm going to shovel their snow. I came up with a little company name and a little quip that went with it, and started marketing to the neighbors. And then once the neighbors start talking, next thing you know, you're doing cutting 5 lawns on one street or whatever.
Yep.
And then that kind of progressed into, when I got into high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had an old car that I was restoring. And it seemed like to me, that's what I wanted to do, was go be an auto mechanic, because I really didn't have any other idea of what I wanted to do. So right after high school, I went to a automotive school in Wyoming. It was one of the best ones in the country at the time. It was very expensive, but it was like a 6-month course, basically, where you went every day, 8 hours a day. It made you wear somewhat of a uniform, and my parents paid for that, and it was very expensive at the time to go through that. And when I got done, I found a job, and then realized this is it was more of a hobby for me. Like I enjoyed the old muscle car type thing, but I don't want to do this for a career. I don't want to come home with grit and dirt under my fingernails every day. No offense to anybody. It just wasn't, I felt like I was limiting myself. And even though I kind of went through high school, I never really, the math classes I really, really struggled with. And it was probably because I just wasn't focusing on it, honestly.
Yeah.
And so I decided, I don't want to do this anymore. What am I going to do? And I just kind of had this pivoting moment where I was like, I got to use my brain more, and I got to use what God gave me. And so I decided to go back to college. And originally my thoughts were, I'm going to go be an architect, because I did have a building trades class in high school, but it was really more just because I loved working with my hands.
Yeah.
And, but I thought to myself, God, my parents already paid for this other school that I went to, and I better figure out how to pay for this on my own. Now, I'm not going to go back to the well and ask them for more money.
Sure. They were like scratching their head going, what in the world?
So yeah, I was literally driving down the road one day. This is no joke. Like, I looked off to the side, and I saw in the strip mall It was just an Army recruiter thing, like free college. And I literally did a U-turn, went right back in the parking lot and was like, what do I got to do to get my free college?
Wow.
And that was how I was solving.
Sign your life
problem.
away here. What's your social security number?
Yeah. So that was back in like 92. And so I ended up joining the National Guard. And at the time, Illinois was one of the states that gave away free tuition if you joined the Guard for basically an 8-year contract of doing your weekend drills and 2 weeks in the summer. Never would I have ever guessed I'd find myself in a foreign country fighting a war, but that's a whole nother piece. But so doing that then allowed me to get back into college. And so I go to a community college. I start going back through the general education stuff. I'm taking math classes. And then another realization was I don't want to be an architect. I want to be an engineer. So I just pivoted again. I'm like, all right, start taking more math classes. And then eventually I get to a university and get my engineering degree. And the whole time I'm going through college, I have my own side business. I'm like a remodeling contractor, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
And I'd go home on the weekends and I'd do jobs and I'd go back to school on Monday. And I was in ROTC at the time to become an officer in the military. I'm working on the weekends. So I've always been that way. It's like try to cram as much in. Yeah. So eventually I get my degree and I moved from Chicago to Arizona. I tried to get a job here through multiple ways, through a recruiter. And finally someone just said, look, just pack your stuff up and move. It's the only way you're going to get a job here. And so I did, just boxed my stuff up in a 15-foot moving truck and drove across the country with my dad. And within 30 days, I got a job as an engineer. And it was kind of cool because, and I didn't realize this was going to kind of go this direction, but a couple of years in as an engineer, I became like the residential guy in the office.
Sure.
That people, they were giving me all these big high-end homes to do engineering on, do the structural engineering on. And I had engineers that would come to me and go, basically, look, I've been designing this stuff for 15, 20 years or whatever, but can you build this in the field? And so I became this sounding board for a lot of engineers that come up to me and say, hey, look, we designed this detail, but can a guy actually construct this in the field? Like, what's the constructability of it?
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed doing all these big high-end custom homes. I'm designing all these structurally, working with the architects. And then I would go out and do, inspections in the field as well. So it was just a really good thing for me to be involved in. And then once again, my mind just starts going another direction. It's like, do I really want to sit behind a desk and be an engineer for the rest of my life?
Yep.
And so
the old entrepreneur whisper.
Yep. And so I had done a ton of remodeling. I had worked for a general contractor back in Illinois. And when you're a general contractor in Illinois versus Arizona, it's two different things. Like back there, you do a lot more of the work yourself as a GC or working for a GC. But out here in Arizona, everything is subcontracted.
Got it.
So fortunately for me, that was a better path because I got to learn so many different things.
Yeah.
And then you put the engineering aspect into it. And I just said to myself, yeah. So I said to myself, let's try to build a house and sell it. And everybody, of course, thought I was out of my mind. And once again, I reached back to my parents. I'm having this conversation with them, and I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but they were like, well, what do you need to do this? And I said, I need like 30 grand. Can you afford me a loan? Yeah. And I don't know, still to this day, I should ask them the question, but I don't know where they pulled the money from, where they had that kind of liquid money. Yeah. And I went all over the place in Scottsdale where I live and tried to find some land. And I stumbled upon a builder that he had two houses side by side that were under construction. They were both at the framing stage. And I think he was a little bit in and over his head. And so I ended up buying one of the houses from him at the framing stage. Wow. And I'd never built a house in my life, right? I've done some remodeling. I've done some other things.
Yeah.
I was just like,
you've done it all on paper.
Yeah. And so it just kind of was like one of those things, like, I'm just going to figure it out. It's a puzzle. Like, how hard can it be? Yeah. You don't know what you don't know. And a lot of things I ran into, stumbling blocks and obstacles or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's a puzzle. Just start putting it together, finding the right people. And so I built that. I finished building that house. And literally that was the time right around 9/11 hit. And I got orders to go overseas for the first time. And we put the house on the market. It sold within a week. So it's like, you couldn't have asked for a better result. You know what I mean? So that went really well. After that, I find myself in a foreign country over there on my first deployment. So it was 9/11. I literally, it was kind of just a weird chain of events. I had gotten engaged. A week later, I get orders to go overseas.
Wow.
And then I'm building this house.
So I got a house. Yeah.
Yeah. I got to finish this thing. And by the way, I'm still an engineer at the time.
Yeah.
And so we get the house done. My wife and I go to the justice of the peace and just get married. We're like, we're just going to do this because if something happens to me over there, I want to make sure she's taken care of.
Yeah.
So we'll do a big wedding when I come back. And so we finished the house. The house sells within a week.
Wow.
It was unbelievable. I get deployed. I come back. I go back to my engineering job, and I'm like, okay, let's do this again. We've had success. It tasted good. Like,
let's hit the repeat button.
Yeah. And so it's just weird back then how much, and I was probably 31 maybe.
Okay.
And I look back now and I'm like, God, I was kind of fearless, right? And really naive. But that lack of fear it just pushed me forward. It was just like, all right, we're going to do this again.
Yeah.
Never had anybody mentor me, no coach, nobody teaching me what to do. It was like, all right, how are we going to do this again? And I just go, okay, well, we just finished one, so let's go buy a 5-acre piece and we can split it into 3 lots and let's build 3 houses.
Yeah.
And so we kind of started doing that. And then again, I built another house and sold it. I was doing this on speculation and had a nice paycheck from that. I ended up paying my parents back on the other one.
Sure.
And at that point I was like, I'm good. I don't need you guys to fund my future and I'll figure it out from here. And so I'm still an engineer, and it came time for a review with my engineering boss, and I sat down in front of him. He's like, you're doing great, and we want to keep continuing giving you the work that we're giving you, and we want to give you a raise. And I was like, I got to stop you because I've made a decision to leave the company. And I'm sure at first he was probably like, what engineering company are you going to? And I was like, no, I'm going to build houses. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And he just very supportive person, very supportive of the military. And he was like, great, best of luck. And he sends me Christmas cards still every year to this day. And that was whatever it was, 15 years ago or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
And then from there, I just took it to the next level, and I just started building more and more homes. Yeah. And I should back up one too. After I did that first house on speculation, the very first house that I would have built from ground up, because the other one I built halfway.
Right. Yeah.
The very first one that I built, I knew how to physically build it, and I knew how to get the subcontractors together. I didn't know what the heck I was doing as far as business and budget. And I had gotten involved with some high, like loan sharks, basically guys that are providing capital at a very high rate.
Yeah.
But I lost $8,000 on the first house I built from the ground up.
Wow.
But fortunately for me, and I don't know if my wife even knows that, but
she does now.
Yeah, she will now, right? I didn't want to say anything. I was like, because that would have freaked her out. Here I am quitting a job as an engineer, and the first house I lose $8,000. Like, what the heck am I doing?
Yeah.
But that was kind of the school of hard knocks, and I already had multiple houses in the queue, in for permits, because it was a time when everything was really starting to grow. Nationwide, but really big in Scottsdale, Arizona. It was growing really fast, so it was easy to go and get work for people. And so I had enough houses in the queue that it just kept me going. And then I never looked back.
Yeah.
And then back, I'm trying to think here. Oh gosh, it was sometime in 2006. I had like 14 years in the military, I think.
Wow.
I made the decision that I was getting out. I was like, my business is just skyrocketing. I can't manage what I'm doing. I can't be focused on that. And then also I didn't want to deploy again because I was like scared to death I'd lose my business at this point, because back then it wasn't really, it was started, but it really wasn't. And now I got all these houses under construction. I've got huge responsibilities, and I've got loans out there and things like that. So I went to my military boss at the time, and I was like, look, I'm done. I want to get out. And she says to me, hey, look, you're probably making a bad decision. You got 14 years in, you got 6 more years before you can retire and collect something from that down the road.
Right.
Why don't you rethink this? Take a hiatus or a break in the service.
Sure.
and take a year off and then reassess it at a year. And I thought about it and I was like, yeah, it's probably a smart thing to do. And so I kept building my houses or whatever. And then all of a sudden, one day I get a phone call, and it's from some lieutenant colonel that says, you're deploying to Afghanistan. It'll probably happen in 90 days. Basically, pack your bags, you're going. And that was a game changer.
Wow.
That, I think I had, I don't know, whatever it was, $4 or $5 million worth of houses going at the time.
Yeah.
And I was the guy. It was a point in my business where I didn't understand what scaling meant. I had an employee that was working in the field, and I had like another employee that was project managing, but I was running everything. Like if I stepped out, the business was going to collapse.
Oh yeah.
And so it was a huge lesson for me in so many different ways. And I tried to defer the deployment. I said, look, I'm not trying to get out of this. I'm not trying to do my duty. I need to finish these houses and then I'll go. And they were like, oh no, you're going in January. And it was like October or November at the time.
Wow. And
so I had to go through the whole processing thing, and I left very first week of January. I was gone for 16 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was during basically the start of the Great Recession, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Chaz Wolfe here. As many of you know, I have been on an absolute mission to help entrepreneurs from all across the country in many different industries level up their game and grow their business and intentionally connect with other entrepreneurs. We do that obviously through the podcast, but we also have a peer-to-peer mastermind group specifically for 7 to 9 figure business owners. We are bringing some of the best and most successful entrepreneurs and minds together in a regular and a super intentional way to not only grow our network, but to be able to leverage. And at a certain point in business, success becomes about leverage, leveraging time, leveraging resources, leveraging key relationships. This is exactly what we're doing inside of the peer-to-peer mastermind group called Gathering the Kings, specifically for 7 to 9 figure business owners. So if that's you, if you're ready to level up your 7 to 9 figure business even to the next level and get around other big hitters just like you, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com, fill out a short application, and it'll come to an application call with me, and I want to chat with you to see if it might be a good fit. Talk soon.
Okay, so I have obviously so many questions. You've led us right to the edge of our seats, really. But there's some good things and bad things that you've already described, which have been just incredible. I want to point out a couple of things to the listener. The fearlessness that you've already described. It's being naive, right? Let's just be honest. Early on, the fearlessness that we have is just the fact that we don't know.
Right.
Because later on, when we know, we hesitate or we double check it, which can be in itself a negative thing because we don't just jump. And so I think that for the listener right now, because they haven't probably built a big business, it's more along the lines of quit overthinking, quit knowing, just jump in, be naive for just a half second. And that sounds like terrible advice, but it really is how all of us that have been quote unquote successful in business at some point or another, we just kind of just jump, like cover the eyes and cross the fingers and go.
Action.
Yeah, exactly. I would even venture to say that you would probably agree that even in the last couple of years, you've done that a little bit, because I know I have. Even at a certain level of success, you still take kind of not uncalculated moves, but risks. And hopefully they're just more and more calculated from a risk management perspective. But okay, so all of this, I mean, in my back of my mind, you're telling the story, and I'm like, okay, this is 2001. Okay, and then the boom. I'm following along the timeline, waiting for what happens in 2008, 2009. But you've got millions of dollars out on inventory, and you physically are in another country, and your business does what? Like, I want this to turn into two things. As you continue to tell a story, I want you to be specific in regard to one thing that worked, a good decision, and something that was just a terrible decision that we, as the listeners, can learn from. So please keep going with the story with those two things in mind.
Yeah. So one of the things from the bad perspective of things, I played the victim in my head. I was like,
because they made you go.
Yeah.
Like,
not only did they make me go, they were so inflexible. Like, put me on a next rotation. There was rotations going all the time. Like, if you're telling me I'm to do my duty, like, just give me a little bit of flexibility here. And so everything was a victim mindset. Why is this happening to me? It's not happening for me. It's happening to me. it's complaining to other people. It's complaining to my wife. It's how are we going to solve this problem? This is horrible. This is the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
And it's hard to take something like that and turn it into a positive at the time, because you're trying to triage everything. Like, how am I going to solve these problems? And what's the first thing I need to do is, well, you better have a candid conversation with every customer you're building a house for, that you're on the hook for millions of dollars in some cases.
Yeah.
And so it's getting through that. And fortunately, everybody that we were building houses for was like, look, this country's at war, and we're going to support you, whatever it takes. We probably know that it's going to be a bumpy road, but we're here to facilitate whatever we can do to help get through to the end. Yeah. And my wife got involved. And so she was very good with customer service and just making sure the customers were okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a lot to put on the two guys I had working for me at the time, but I was like, look, we've got emails. I first went to a mobilization station for whatever it was, 3 months or something. And so I'm still in the States. I can use my phone. I can email when I get time. And so we just slowly went through this process of weaning me out of the situation and putting more and more on them. So being in the States for a few months, doing my training before we went overseas was very helpful in that regard. Yeah. And then once we got over there, it was touch and go. There was ability to email and get on phone calls, but it was very few and far between. And satellite phones were so expensive back then. So it was just, you guys got to do it. It's like, rip the Band-Aid off. This is what's happening. Sorry, I'm gone.
I'll talk to you in a week.
Yeah. And that's how it was. And then once I got established in country over there, you could buy like satellites, and people were doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And back then it wasn't Zoom. What the heck was it? I can't think of. I don't know. It'll come to me. But anyways, it's how we were interfacing and talking overseas. And so we were able to communicate much more. And it was good for my wife too, because knowing that I'm over there, and I didn't really tell her what I was doing exactly. I was an infantry officer. So I was
right there.
Boots on ground for a year. And between me and another platoon, we conducted like 530 something patrols outside the wire every day. And multiple days we were outside a couple times a day. And so it really helped being able to communicate like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think obviously not all of us are being put in that situation, but it's funny because there's a couple of guys that I've said what I'm about to say to you. I've said it to them, a couple of guys in my mastermind group, due to circumstances. I can think of one guy having a surgery where he physically cannot do the work anymore in his construction business. And then some other situations like this, where you physically were taken away. And in the moment, it appears as if, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? But what it actually forces your brain to do is solve it in a different way. Mm-hmm. And probably when you came back, and we'll give you a chance maybe to answer this, but I'm going to guess that maybe you jumped back in right away, but then you realized pretty quickly that you could run the business in a completely different format because you had to. And it's almost like a blessing in disguise, because during the process of having to do it, being forced to do it that way, it sucks. Let's just be honest. It's just bumpy. Mm-hmm. But when you have that then process in place, or at least the awareness that like, oh, wow, this can exist, right? Like when I opened up franchise locations in cities where I did not live, it was like a little bit of being naive and just kind of going for it. But then I realized, like, because I physically cannot be there today, tomorrow, even this week or this month, I had to operate and manage those businesses in a totally different way. And then when I looked at the businesses that I had that were like just right down the road, it was like, I'm enabling all of this because I physically am here. Yeah. So what would you say? I want to pull this out for the listener and then we'll move on. What would you say to the guy right now who's doing everything like you were, like I was years ago, and he maybe isn't physically being removed, right? What would you suggest that he do to be able to get to the place that you and I are now, where we understand maybe systems or teams of people, like the other things that maybe we didn't have then, but we eventually had to figure out through the bump? What would you say?
Yeah, I've learned the hard way. Like I said, I never had a coach, never had a mentor, didn't really understand. I never took a business class in my life. I was an engineer. Yeah. Very, very left-brained. I kind of figured things out along the way to some extent, but I never understood what scaling meant. Right. And so one of the biggest recommendations that I would say was go find a mentor, find a coach, find somebody that can help you, because when you're wearing all those hats, I'm doing the estimating, I'm kind of running, I'm interfacing with the customer, I'm writing checks or whatever. And back then, that's how it was. I had a big checkbook and I had physically handwriting checks back then. But you're wearing all those checks, and you have to do that in the beginning. You've got to hustle. You've got to grind like that, and you got to get out there and skin your knees to the point where this hurts now. Like, I got to figure out my who, not how, right? Which is a great book to read.
Yep.
But it's starting to bring people in that can remove those hats from you, so that you can work on the business versus constantly working in the business. But the mindset back then, I mean, it was just hard for me to get past this. Nobody can do it as good as me, right? Like, how many entrepreneurs go through that? And the light bulb went off. I had heard this somewhere, and I don't know where it was. They said, well, what if somebody could do it 80% as good as you, or 90% as good as you? And I'm just like, that's pretty powerful, actually, because quit thinking nobody can do it as good as you, number one, because there's lots of people out there that have different experiences. But what if you hired somebody that could do it at 80, 90%? And you've got to bridge that gap in the 20 or 10%. And that itself was a mindset shift. But bringing a coach into my life, even just a couple of years ago, has been a game changer for me. Yeah. And people said, well, what the heck are you getting a coach for? You've been in business for 18 years at the time. Like, what do you need a coach for at this point? And it's like, once I got a taste of it, that coach looks for my blind spots. He's approaching problems from a different angle that I never thought of, because most of the time we're so ingrained to look one direction or think one way. Yep. And that's where a coach can really help, or if you can find a mentor. Those are probably the biggest solutions. But the other thing too is not trying to throw money at a problem, throw a process at a problem, throw a system at a problem.
There you go.
And that was another hard knock I had. I had an employee one time that tried to explain that to me, and I was just like, whatever, just get out there and run these jobs. I just need these jobs built. Like, I wasn't listening to what somebody was telling me.
Yeah.
And
moving too fast.
Yep. And so that starting to create systems and processes and throwing those at a problem is a game changer as well.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And the process or the system can be a thing, a checklist of sorts, an SOP, or it can be people, a team, or maybe a mixture of both. And to your point, that is what solves most problems. But there's obviously skill sets that go along with building a team or being a good leader, or understanding what steps, or being able to dial something down into simplicity, 1, 2, 3, 4, that some people just don't maybe come to naturally. That's okay, but there's ways for you to be able to hone those skills for sure. One quick thing that you said on the 80%, I 100% agree with you, because I've been talking about this for probably 10 plus years. And that's the only way I was able to scale. I had close to 70 employees, 3 different states. I didn't even live in the States. How do you do that without allowing someone else to be them? And so I agree with the 80%. And what I had to come to a realization was that it wasn't them only producing 80%. It was just 80% of my 100. It was their 100.
Right.
And so it wasn't like they were maliciously trying to harm me or do less, or that they were lazy. Their 100 looked different. That's all. And so I needed to be better, a better architect, a better facilitator of what those hundreds look like pieced together. And again, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, like you said, think that they can just do it better. I had a guy on the show here probably a month or two ago, and he said, I used to think the same thing too, that I was better at every little thing. But here's the reality, is that if you're doing all of them, even though you might be individually better at each individual task than all of them, let's just say that you are, if you're doing all of the tasks, there's zero chance you're operating at 100% at all of them anyway. In fact, most likely you're only operating at 20, 30, 40%. And so that 80% that they're producing is actually like a huge upgrade to you being a Momo and doing it yourself.
That's right. Absolutely.
So I appreciate the perspective and humility there, because it takes a lot to be able to say, man, I'm a pretty qualified individual, but man, I can only go so far by myself. That's really what it is.
Yeah. And it's so much of it's empowering people and leadership. And for me, trying to run my company with a military mindset or a military leadership perspective versus how civilians are led, was two totally different things. So that was a hurdle for me as well. But the biggest thing that has helped me and my company is creating a culture and investing in the employees. We're trying to do things like educating them on money, bringing in a nutritionist, just all these different things. We do staycations with the families and things like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's investing in them and showing them that you truly care, and people will go the extra mile for you all the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I heard a video from Elon Musk in the last month or two. And he said in one of his factories, he slept at his desk for a period of time. It was like a 2 or 3 month period, and purposely, not because he had to, obviously, but purposely. And his desk was like right in the middle. And so like everybody walking in and out, and he said, the shift change crowd, that people change the shifts, they would walk by and I'd be sleeping at my desk, or I would be waking up from my desk or whatever. And it's like, they knew I was in it for sure, without a doubt. And so rather than necessarily doing something for them, obviously those things are great also, but it's the same mindset of like, if I'm going to ask you to be in it, I'm going to be in it also. And that obviously looks different for maybe an owner versus a laborer or whatever, but the mindset or the commitment level is still the same. And that can go as far as doing cool things for them and their families. But I want to transition here to our speed round. We've got a couple different unique type of questions here, where maybe a little bit more business practical. You've given us just an incredible story of overcoming, and then obviously you were able to come back and pick up the pieces. So I do want you to kind of pick up the story a little bit here, but I want to know about KPIs and what is the one thing inside of your business today that if you could only pick one thing to track, what would it be?
Yeah, and it's people are like, oh yeah, you got QuickBooks and I can analyze spreadsheets till the cows come home. But the one metric that is important to my business is customer satisfaction. And it's having these, what we call a mid-job survey. And then once the job's completed, having a survey at the end. That is so much more important than tracking revenue and all these other KPIs that you can pull out of QuickBooks, right? That an accountant can analyze. But that customer service and that their satisfaction on what we're doing for them, we're providing a service, we're solving a problem for them. And how are we doing at it? That's really what, as the owner of the company, I really focus on and pay attention to.
Are there any quick tidbits that you can give to us on either strategy or tools or anything that you use inside of that mindset to be able to actually deliver good results, but then also to be able to collect the satisfaction reviews or whatever?
It's having that culture and instilling it in every person in the company, and making sure that they understand what your vivid vision is, what your intent is, what your core values are. And I think everything follows. We recently instated this mid-job survey, as we call it, just to get a pulse on, hey, how are we doing? Is there anything that we can do better for you to solve your problem ultimately? And I think that it's the kind of the KISS method, right? It's very simple and it just works. We've had complicated project management software and all this stuff, but it always falls back to the simplest things.
Yep. If you got people who understand the mission, that usually turns into people who care, and people who care deliver the mission, and which turns into a customer that feels well taken care of. Am I picking up what you're laying down?
That's exactly right. Most of the people we build for have a lot of money. They're business owners as well. Sure. So they get it. They understand. They want to feel important. And when you got 15, 20 customers, everybody wants to feel important. So you have to, but it is a challenge.
Yeah. Those touch points in that customer journey is that's got to be dialed in. That's for sure.
Yeah.
What book or resource would you recommend, Mike, for a business owner trying to scale? Since before you never knew what that meant, what would you recommend now?
So I got turned on to the book Who Not How a few years back, and honestly, that was a game changer for me.
Got it. I've got it right here on my desk.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a great book. What was your takeaway from that?
Just as simple as it says, find your who's. Quit trying to do everything yourself. Take the hats off and really force yourself to find your who to solve your problem. And I instill that in my employees all the time. It's like, I'm telling you what needs to be done, but I'm not telling you to do it. Like, find your who. Yep. And I've definitely ingrained that in them. So I think it's been very helpful.
Yeah, which ultimately leads to teamwork and that thing. I'll throw this out real quick. I don't do this very often, but one of the things that hit me like a ton of bricks in that book was the procrastination. I do not see myself as a procrastinator at all. I am a get it done, task oriented, freaking let's check the list. Let's work until midnight every night. Like I'll get stuff done. But I'll tell you, obviously, as the list gets long and longer and longer and longer, if you don't have the right who's. And so procrastination for me, that I've learned from this book, is not necessarily that I'm a procrastinator, that I'm not willing to do it, or that I'm lazy, or that I'm pushing things off. It's an indicator to me that I don't have a who that needs to be in place to be able to take care of that list or that thing on the list or whatever, which it ultimately comes back to if someone like me as a get it done person is not getting stuff done or procrastinating, it's just because I'm trying to do too many things myself. Right. And again, it's just like a natural check of like, okay, am I operating at the highest level? No, because I'm doing things that could easily be given to somebody else. But why haven't I? I don't know. Just because we just get caught in this realm of I'll take it. Yeah. Rather than who needs that?
Yeah. And as you scale, honestly, I mean, you could do it and you could solve that problem right away, but you're not helping the long-term problem. And procrastination is, like he says in the book, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And you mentioned it's basically a metric for you, right? Like either you got to find a who, or there's something that's holding you back because you're overanalyzing it maybe or whatever. So it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Exactly. Love it. Okay. What do you think about, you kind of briefly mentioned a mastermind group earlier, but what do you think about intentionally networking or masterminding with other entrepreneurs? What has that been able to do for you in the last couple of years, as you said?
It just opens your eyes to so many different things. I subscribed to the University of YouTube for quite a while, and that's how I found the mastermind that I'm in. And ultimately ended up joining another one as well. And having all that experience from both a business side, but also having these pillars and having the spiritual side as well. I feel like it's really balanced my life out, and it's really made me think so much differently than I ever have in my entire life.
Yeah. That's incredible. To basically press the bounds of thinking is what I'm picking up from you.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know, and you don't know who you don't know.
Right. And it's all these tools that you kind of learn and people that you come across that have already experienced these things, or maybe it's you're watching somebody on YouTube that you follow, whether it's business or nutrition or finances or whatever it is. And being able to lean on people and ask questions and ask for help, which was always a hard thing for me. But having a group of people that you can really, truly be present, be transparent, and ask for help is such a game changer.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, I've got one last question here for you, Mike. If you could whisper in the younger Mike's ear, what would you say?
Probably ask for help.
Yeah.
Don't try to do it all yourself. And it's funny because my wife for years was always kind of trying to get me to do that. She was trying to get me to go find a mentor. And I would say, well, what builder is going to mentor me? It's competition at that point. So I'm not even going to look into it. But asking for that help and having that open mind to know that you don't know it all.
Yeah.
And using all the resources possible and leveraging that is huge. I mean, it's changed. It's made a hockey stick in my life as far as running a business, being a better person, and just continually striving to be 1% better every day, whatever that means.
Yeah. I love the answer. I love your mindset. I love the overcoming of your story. You've been incredible in sharing all that. I can't agree with you even like with you more on what those relationships can do. And you even slipped in there at the very end there that even listening to your wife earlier, which I think a lot of us listening here today can maybe relate to that as well. So again, even though we just met and you haven't met the listeners, you've been vulnerable, you've shared, man, and it's been really, really impactful. So thank you for that. How can the listener connect with you? Maybe they're in Scottsdale or in and around the area. They know somebody and they want to build a fantastically beautiful house, or maybe they're just an entrepreneur and they want to reach out. Pick a brain.
Yeah. So our company has a website. It's peakonebuilders.com, the one spelled out. And our company phone number is 480-481-5150. And I definitely love networking and talking with other individuals. And I've tried to give back as much as I can, whether it's to the veteran community or to help anybody else. And I'm all about it. So
Yeah, we love it. We appreciate that openness as well. And we'll put all that in the show notes. That way people can easily connect with you and socials and stuff like that. But Mike, you have been, again, just incredible. We wish you nothing but blessing to your family, your business, your incredible team. It sounds like that you have in place and their families. Thank you for being here.
Thanks a lot, Chaz. I appreciate the opportunity. It's been fun.
Thank you for listening to Gathering the Kings today. I hope that you were able to pull out a few nuggets to go apply into your business right away. More importantly, though, I hope that you're realizing that it takes more to be successful than just being by yourself, doing it all on your own, carrying the weight all by yourself. What I have realized, not only in my own journey from multiple businesses and multiple different industries, and now interviewing over 200 or 300 other very successful 7, 8, and 9-figure business owners, is that it's tough to do it alone. And so Gathering the Kings exists to bring together successful entrepreneurs. In fact, we are putting together 1,000 kings, specifically who are grateful but not done. We're intentionally assembling kings who fight tooth and nail for their business, family, and communities. And here's what we believe, that in the pursuit of excellence in those areas, that it ignites within us the responsibility to govern power and forge a lasting legacy. So if that relates and resonates with you, and you know that you need people around you, sharp, qualified, other very successful business owners, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com. I want you to take a look at what we're doing and see if it makes sense for you to be part of our pursuit to 1,000 kings. Talk soon.